in my exposure to the Word of God and my journey in life, I just felt like, just to have an impact in this world for good.
Yeah.
And, let's face it, it's a pretty broad brush, that one, so it's hard to get wrong.
Good coverage. Yep.
But that sort of drives a lot of my decision-making in how does what I do impact the broader community and broader world, and how can I make a difference there?
Yeah. Hey, welcome back, everyone. Good to see you. Welcome to the Monday Movement Vodcast. Got a great guest today. As you know, we have deep conversations with Christians who feel called into the marketplace. And today we're talking with Ross Buttenshaw. He was the CEO of Christians Against Poverty, so really knows the not-for-profit space well. You did an amazing job, Ross, with growing that business over time. We'll come to that in a minute.
Yep.
But I noticed on your LinkedIn profile, you said one of your sort of key drivers is to impact the world for good.
Yep.
Tell us a bit about that. What does that mean to you?
I think for a long time, everyone tries to discover what their purpose is in the world and outwork that. And I suppose my mum always said to me, Ross, you're going to be a pastor one day. I just didn't believe it.
Yeah.
And in the outcome of that, I really, in my exposure to the Word of God and my journey in life, I just felt like, just to have an impact in this world for good.
Yeah.
And, let's face it, it's a pretty broad brush, that one, so it's hard to get wrong.
Good coverage. Yep.
But that sort of drives a lot of my decision-making in how does what I do impact the broader community and broader world, and how can I make a difference there?
Yeah. So that's a genuine thing that you think about and consider if you're making changes. And I love that. That's good. And can you tell us a little bit about CAP as an organization first? Like, what does it do? Why does it exist?
CAP was birthed from the founder, John Kirkby, who really experienced debt and poverty that relates to being bound up by financial stress, I suppose. And out of that and out of his faith, he wanted to make a difference. And John became a good friend of mine. And so it really exists to go out into the world and impact that area, which is a very difficult area from if you don't have the experience and the knowledge of how do you deal with people's debts and situations and financial capabilities. And also at the heart of the matter was a desire just to share the message, the gospel, the good news broadly. And that was always part of the mission of CAP as well.
Yeah.
And so those two things combined together were central to the birthing of CAP.
Love it.
Yeah.
And for those who may not be familiar with the organization, can you just give us an idea of the kinds of things they do?
The organization now exists because I'm not actively involved with CAP, but it exists in a number of countries, Australia, UK. They've got in Canada and the US, I believe. And they partner with churches to give the churches the tools.
Yeah.
And so part of that is developing, I suppose, the infrastructure to support the churches with all the financial negotiations and expert knowledge that's required to play a role in the finance world that you wouldn't easily be able to create yourself at the church level.
Absolutely.
And in essence, you've got to deliver your service through a means, and the church is an amazing means to reach localities and so on. So that was always the model of partnering with churches to reach this issue and to do what churches do well. Yeah, is to share the gospel and to care for the poor and the needy and those in need of help. Build community.
So the sort of client that CAP has through the churches, what would be a normal sort of story for them?
Well, there's many stories I remember, but from single mums, homeless, living in cars, maybe an extreme type of story, but far too common still.
Yeah.
To just average families who just burdened by debt, don't know where to turn. Edging on bankruptcy, losing homes, families in disarray because there's often many factors. It's not just a debt issue usually. So there can be a lot of social dysfunction as well.
Yeah.
So it can be broad range, and different countries that were involved did have different demographics. So some can be lower to middle class, and the UK, I think, reached a lot of clients who were definitely struggling at that lower demographic economically.
Yep.
And but it's a very one-on-one situation that personally getting involved and advocating for people with their debt. So no matter what their situation, just having someone to stand up for them,
Absolutely.
it's really the willingness of the person needing help to say, I will have someone come in and stand up for me. And
yeah, hard to do.
Yeah.
And how did you get involved in that in the first place?
Our pastor was introduced to John Kirkby, the founder, and I don't even remember the time frame now. It was back in the late 1990s. And we just became they brought him out to our church from the UK just to share the vision of CAP, and I liked it so much I signed up to become a regular donor, just a small amount.
Yep.
And I remember getting home from work and had a message on the phone from him thanking us for our support, and it spoke a lot.
Yeah,
the fact that what he put into just thanking us, and that's where we first got involved, and through a range of different circumstances, we felt led to take the family to the UK. I had a 9 and a 6-year-old, and we were just looking for an adventure, I suppose, when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
And we decided, my wife has a heritage from the UK, so we're able to get visas and that, no problem. We decided to go on an adventure, give up our jobs in the corporate world and so on.
Awesome.
And went over to the UK, had nowhere to live, no jobs lined up, or I'd been making inquiries.
Yep.
But I was looking into, bank rolls and different things like that.
Sure.
And that's our first foray into making that journey. But my pastor did say, connect with John Kirkby, the founder. He'll help you find a house.
Yeah.
He'll be a friend over there. And that was the only reason we were connecting with him. There was a church in the same city where they were based. That's where we wanted to go.
Yeah.
And it all sort of ballooned from there, in that I'll tell you this one story is that I had job offers, and I had one job offer. It was for a credit agency, and I actually was ready to accept it, and I was just sitting there because John had not just helped us with property, but he had said, well, we've got some jobs going.
Yeah.
They had 25 staff at the time, so it was very small.
Yeah, wow.
And
Early
said,
days.
will you come and go for these jobs? So we'd gone for an interview with the charity thinking maybe this is a direction we're being taken in.
Yeah.
And it was just an admin role, negotiating with creditors and so on.
Yeah.
And I remember turning down this job without having the charity job accepted because something inside me said, that's not the direction for you. And I couldn't believe I was doing it at the time. And I think a day later we got offered these other,
particularly in a new country. I mean, that shows a level of dedication to doing what God is asking you to do.
Yeah.
So do you feel that sort of uncomfortableness that you felt was a discernment of maybe some direction from him?
Absolutely. Yeah. I even thought I would have to go get a second job in a pub.
Yeah.
And I was getting applications. I thought, I can't afford to work for these charity wages.
Yeah.
And so I went to the Walkabout pub in Bradford and grabbed an application.
Yeah.
Again, I got a very strong sense from God that to not even proceed with that.
Okay.
And the word at the time was, I will multiply your finances.
Yeah. Love it.
And I mean, historically, yes, we've been taken care of, no problems at all.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if we're expecting his provision, we really have to do it his way.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Even if that doesn't kind of make sense. And I've turned down roles that were significant change and shift, and then ended up in something better because I turned that down. Like it's
does not surprise me.
Totally just surrendering to him in the midst of that. And John Kirkby's quite a dynamo, isn't he?
He's a legend.
Yeah. He's a great speaker.
Yep.
Always enjoyed his way of communicating and such an incredible story.
We've remained good friends, and in retirement he started another evangelical ministry in the UK,
He's not the
No.
retirement kind of guy, is he?
No, why not just start something else in your 60s?
Yeah, why not? Why not? I love it. I love that dynamism.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your how you came to the Lord in the first place.
Well, my mum became a Christian when I was probably about 7 or 8, and my dad was an atheist and remained so for probably the next 10 years. So I was raised with a mother who had a real genuine faith experience from a non-Christian background.
Yeah.
And so we followed my mum. She took us to church. It was a Pentecostal church, but it was a real grounding in.
Yep.
I did love it, and I think something sort of connected in my heart from a very young age.
Yeah.
But I also had my father who didn't believe for many years. To the point where he was an atheist, good man, and eventually he came around gradually, bit by bit. He started making excuses to keep an eye on us at the church.
Very important.
Yep. One day he just pulled out his Speedos and he got baptized at church, and it was great surprising experience. And so I grew up in in that environment, but had my own personal experience probably around 14, 15, where I had to make my own decisions. That this was the life I wanted to live.
It's a definite choice, isn't it? Like, and you worked in the commercial as an analyst for some time, and then you told us the story about getting into the not for profit. How did you find that transition, working for something that had a very clear sense of purpose and direction?
It was amazing. Anyone who's worked in the corporate world, most of the businesses I'd worked in were multinationals before then, even starting and working up from a low level. And you are a number. We used to joke that, if you went on holidays, you usually came back to a promotion or a move on offer because that's when they looked at your file.
Right. Right.
So going from that environment where big organization, thousands of employees, to very small, like this was a 25 people, passionate about making a difference and very growth orientated.
Yeah.
It actually was more entrepreneurial than the corporate world for me.
Oh, for sure.
Because it was like just going to a small business startup where there wasn't the money there. They didn't have the right people, but we had grandiose ideas of how to grow.
A lot of which happened. In the UK, just massive influence over there now.
Yeah.
And you came back to get involved with the Australian organisation here, which was very small, wasn't it, when you first arrived?
It was. We had over in the UK, maybe they had 50 odd partnerships with churches. We had about 8,
right,
I believe, at the time. And so we just existed in New South Wales, around Sydney, and one centre in Queensland. So that was the extent of our positioning at the time.
Yep.
Had income sources, and I think the budget at the time was around the $700,000 mark a year. No guarantees where the money was coming from every year.
Yep.
And of course, just to add, fuel to fire for that time, we hit the GFC around. Well, we all know when that was.
Yes.
Put a lot of pressure on the charity financially, and we were planning to grow, not just in New South Wales and Queensland, but further afield. And so, that was a very interesting time.
Yeah, totally challenged in the midst of that.
Yeah.
So you grew the organisation extraordinarily well over that 8 or so years that you led it, and the 10 or 12 years that you were there overall. And I know you see these things as a ministry. You talked about being guided by God. What was that like for you, as far as the sort of functionality of staying connected to God and understanding what He was wanting to do, and the sort of functional leadership piece around how do you manage an organisation?
Yeah, for me at the time, the faith element it felt critical. It felt like a critical organ in the body that if you didn't have it and weren't connected, it just wouldn't happen.
Yep.
Mainly because we were always short of money at the time, and we had a real belief that God was our provider.
Yep.
Ultimately.
Yep.
That wasn't making excuses for not getting the job done or doing the right things or applying good business approach.
Yeah.
But we did have this true belief that he was our provider.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, you're often on your knees, and there were times where we would, as an organization, be on our knees for the money and the blessing. And that's, you can't do that unless you remain close to God. And
that's true.
And there's no formula for what that exactly looks like.
Yep.
But it's usually arms outstretched.
Yes.
Please.
help now would be good.
Yeah.
Help me.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And people understand that ministry dynamic in a church environment. And I think some people understand it in a not-for-profit that's faith-based. But then you went all apostate and left. Once you'd fixed that organization, it was grown, you left and went into the sort of financial advisory practice area.
Apostate.
Apostate, do you see that as ministry as well?
Absolutely. I might have shared with you before that the year I did leave CAP, and it was this sense that we'd taken it from a very struggling organization to well-funded, sustainably funded, the point where we weren't wondering where the next paycheck was coming from. There's definitely a sense for me that I think this is what I was here to do, and the next stage is not for me. And that was okay. And funnily enough, just before I'd made that decision, I felt God saying, the word influence was on my life, and next thing you know, I'm making the decision to leave what I consider quite an influential role.
Yep.
And it's funny how God works.
Indeed.
And to make that move, I had actually thought that the role in financial advice was a very personal role, which suited me.
Yeah.
Now it's quite different to leading an organization, very different.
Absolutely.
Very personally. But in some ways you're providing leadership to people at a personal level.
Yep.
And it took me a while to realize that the influence you can have at a corporate level is different to the influence you can have at a personal level. Both are very important.
Yeah.
And so I still see myself as having a lot of influence. It's just more one-on-one rather than a bigger corporate influence.
Absolutely. I think all Christians are in full-time ministry.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think we get so caught up in the day-to-day, we forget to remember that God's in the midst of that, and he has a plan and purpose for our Wednesday afternoon as much as our Sunday morning.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I was talking to an advisor who'd been doing it for most of his life.
Yeah.
And he wasn't particularly any faith-based background or anything, but he said to me, Ross, he said, financial advisors are like, you're like a priest to your clients. They tell you everything and you know everything that's going on, except you probably know more.
Yeah.
You probably know more than the priest.
Yeah, exactly.
And I totally agree. After nearly, just sitting 9 years in the advice space, we share a lot and our clients share a lot with us.
For sure.
And it's quite a privilege.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you really are ministering into that space, and often in difficult circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a very trusted relationship, isn't it?
Trusted. You know what? And what I found out is through all this change, I found out what I really value about myself.
Yeah.
And to be trusted with someone's, it's not just the finances, but the personal aspects of their life, and to be trusted and for them to call you when things are not going great, or just to run by their decision making.
Yeah.
I worked out that I really value being trusted.
Yeah.
It's one of the highest. If someone said, I don't trust you, Ross, it would be like a massive slap in the face. Yeah. What have I done wrong?
I don't trust you, Ross. No, that's good, isn't it? Like it's good, I think, to know what we're wired for, what our purpose is. He talked about, wanting to impact the world. You had that on a large scale. Now you've got it on a one-to-one.
Yep.
And both are equally as valid and equally as sacred callings.
Yeah.
I find a lot of churches struggle with that concept. I mean, often run by pastors who want to sort of defend, and which is a wonderful attribute and protect people, but sometimes miss the fact that releasing people into their ministries, whatever they're doing, whether they're, a plumber, a CEO, a financial advisor, whatever it might be, is their calling and it's sacred. And my own personal opinion on that is that I think churches would do well to release people into their ministry, teach contextually for a Wednesday afternoon as much as a Sunday morning.
Yep.
And the irony would be that churches would be full on that basis. What's been your experience as far as you've spent a lot of time in churches through the not-for-profit side of things? Do you think that is changing, that people are getting more awareness of that, or is it we're a long way from that dynamic?
I think most church leaders would express that as a belief.
Okay.
But the tension of growing a church, depending on how you want to grow it, and truly walking that belief where you empower people in your church to be everything they can out in the community, it's a tension that sometimes has to be managed and is not always managed well, because you've got the vision of the church and you want to grow it and you want to reach the world, and that takes money, it takes people.
Yeah.
And when you got people and they've committed to their course in life, and they don't have as much there's that tension. And so it's not a right or wrong. I think most leaders would say, we want strong people in the community. Yeah. And because when you do well at what you're called to do, you get rewarded for it. If you have a faith in God and you sow back into the church, then you can help fund that side of things. But it's finding that balance between how you grow the church and how you release people to do both. Yes. And some people will be called into ministry within the church.
Absolutely.
And look, I've found that as a battle most of my life, because I think it's one of those things that was injected into me as a young man that I've always felt like called.
Yeah.
But I've always felt some sense of challenge of when I went to the UK, it was actually a direct challenge to that, because I was within a church where I thought, this is my future. This is where I'm going to be. I'm going to minister here one day.
Yeah.
And by leaving that, I sort of pushed that aside and trusted God.
Yeah.
And he took me in a pathway I never saw coming.
Good call.
Yeah. And so it's definitely very real, but it's a tension that I don't think can be underestimated.
No, for sure. And look, church leadership, it's a tough gig.
Yeah,
it's such a tough gig, and a lot
of respect.
Totally, absolutely. I'm not sure I could do it, but it takes a special sort of person to be able to do that, minister in that way. A lot of the people that listen to this are kind of wrestle with the marketplace and feeling called into the marketplace, and they have that challenge. I think that dynamic of, is it a valid ministry if I'm called to be an entrepreneur or do something like that? Would you have any advice for people who are wrestling with the whole concept of ministry and secular sacred divide?
The biggest thing I would say is that we all have a responsibility. And if you can only grab hold of that and see yourself as having a responsibility to people outside the church, because that's really where a lot of the work God, is focusing on.
Yeah.
Then we start to say, well, what is my role in that? But if you don't think you have a responsibility, then it becomes a bit of a wash of not knowing why are you there, what are you doing. The responsibility becomes where the most time we spend in life is with our workmates. When you think, how many hours a day do we spend?
So true.
You get home, you talk to the wife, the kids, you spend time with, but how much time do you spend with your workmates? So if you don't have a philosophy for what your purpose is in being there, other than just to earn a paycheck and do a job, then you're missing out big time on really establishing what you can do in the world. Each one of us probably has some form of pastoral influence, and that's a very responsible thing. You can, I don't know about you, but how many people do you come across who suffer sickness and marriage breakdown, problems with their kids, financial challenges? Almost everyone in your workplace is going through some version of that. And they can either see you as the pious Christian who just sprouts judgment at times, and which we can sometimes be accused of, or they can see you as someone who has their source with the true God.
Yeah.
And the way you handle things in life, because as Christians, we're not absolved from going through tough times.
No.
I know that personally. I'm sure you would.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how we handle that is being watched, and how we can show love and concern and compassion to our workmates. They're just like everyone is a part of that family, whether they're slightly extended from you or not. And
Absolutely.
I think we do have a responsibility for that.
Absolutely.
That's the mission.
For sure. Yeah. And bringing those Christian principles, working with excellence and integrity, and serving those around us, loving, not being judgmental. Very easy to say and very hard to do in a secular environment, but absolutely mission critical. I think that we embrace God and aware of His presence. I think when we're out doing what He's called us to do.
Yeah.
Any other advice for people that are wrestling with that? I mean, do you have any disciplines that you have to help you achieve that?
The discipline I find I most focus on is my personal time with God. Now, if you use the word discipline, I don't often associate that with myself as being, I'm not what I would consider a highly disciplined person, but I do put disciplines in my life. And one of the most recent things I do in the most recent years is I try and create a bit of a rhythm for my time with God. And it was just a little bit of a revelation recently, actually, to seeing that when in Genesis and the creation of the world, God created night and day.
Yeah.
It's like we often think that the beginning of the day is daytime, but I've sort of switched my thinking to prepare my heart and my mind for the next day at the night before.
I like that.
So I see that as the day beginning as I go to bed.
Okay.
And it's a little bit of
a great perspective. That is.
I've just had this, and it's been a recent switch.
Yeah.
Because there's times where you wake up on Monday, maybe you need an extra boost of motivation. Maybe you have. So to me, it's what's happening the night before is very important. And I'm building a bit of a rhythm around the themes that I would commit just to raising.
Yep.
And I would even include it. I look at my diary. I understand who's coming into my office this week. I know their lives. I start to talk to God about my clients.
Yeah.
Specifically asking, can I make a difference? How can I speak into their lives? And, it's not an overt thing.
Yep.
I just think it's right to be, why can't we stand in the gap? And
Absolutely.
Why can't we put someone's name on the list where we feel we know a few things they're going through? And so to me, it's become more of the night before is where I settle myself. And a lot of what we struggle with in the world, no matter if you have a relationship with God or not, we can struggle with that sense of peace.
Yep.
I think it's one of the biggest challenges we face in this world. The world gets more and more complex.
Yeah.
From how do you plan for your retirement? All these things you have to now consider rather than just getting a government pension when you retire. And there's so many things you have to work through, plan for, mortgage, stress, cost of living, whatever it is, career advancement. How do you do that? How do you find the peace in that? We've got to go to our source if we want to find that peace. And we've got to be able to hear. And it's not that hard to actually find when you find the time to really settle. Like in 15 minutes, I think I can find peace from God.
Yeah.
But you just can't have one and then it lasts forever. You have to keep going back and seeking God on that. So it's about a regular discipline. That's the discipline in my life, is that I've had to build those sort of things in.
Love it.
Yeah.
I love that scripture talks about being plugged into the vine.
Yep.
Like if you're plugged in, you get fruit. It just happens. If you're not plugged in, doesn't matter what you do, there's no fruit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Such a great principle. Ross Buttenshaw, really enjoyed having a conversation with you. I know we've known each other for well over a decade, but you did an incredible job with CAP, and now you're in the financial advising area and doing an amazing job there as well. Yep. So God bless you, my friend. Thank you thank you for coming down.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Good to see you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks for joining us at the Monday Movement Vodcast. Please like, subscribe, and share. And if you want to know more about what we do, you can find us at mondaymovement.com.